born in Kalamazoo in 1974. His experiences growing up across the United States and Germany shaped an early awareness of cultural tension and belonging. He studied at the College for Creative Studies, and he was awarded a Kresge last year. Taurus, can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the title for Zebra Intelligence and how this work sort of manifested over the last, year or so? I think we've been talking about it.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a couple of years. Like, I originally wanted to have a show in 2025, but I had so much going on. I was doing a lot of paintings and stuff, but I had so much going on that I was like feeling wishy-washy about committing something, so I didn't approach you about it to like kind of lock in a date, and and like you're booked out like a year and a half, you know what I mean? So like I was dragging my feet, so it ended up being 2026, but in the meantime, like I got the Kresge, so it was kind of like, it was meant to work out that way, I guess. So, so getting right into it, the show is the culmination, I think, of a few years of work, I mean, really, my last solo show was here, 2023. That was Created Equal, and that was the third of like three solo shows back to back. I had one every year, 2021, 2022, 2023. And then, things kind of went quiet for me. 23 was great. Like, my last solo show here was amazing. From that show, one of my paintings was purchased by the Contemporary Art Museum, and I was included in the Black Skilled Labor, Black Realism in Detroit show that they had later that year. So that was a big year for me, and I think like sometimes those like really like peak experiences are, they're amazing. They're the things that I've dreamed of for years. But then when it happens, it's kind of like it's intimidating. You're like, oh, how do I follow this up? so anyway, 23, my last show, and things were quiet for a few years. Like I said, I've been pretty quietly, putting up things out here and there in some group shows, but like really kind of working towards my next solo show. But before this, I was really working towards like the last Kresge round, because you should start like at least a year and a half, like start getting ready for that's my mentality. I mean, I was really like getting ready for that, but I got that. That's been great. And so, the last year I've been busy. I was working on my film. Hope, if you haven't seen it yet, it's on the website, right?
Yeah.
It's on my website, it's on the Kresge website. It's I'm really happy that it's gonna live on the website forever. I think working in that film, I spent 4 months working on that because I ended up doing the animation for it. And then as soon as that film was done, I started working on this show, because, I finished the film in January, right? So I jumped right into this show.
Yeah.
So, but I think going through working on my film, really helped me get here with this body of work. It really informed the work that I'm doing. So getting to Zebra Intelligence and this particular show, how did I get here? This is the culmination of me finding my voice to speak about my experience of going through life crossing racial boundaries, for lack of a better term. being biracial, having black and white family, you know, obviously, like, I was born into that, but because of, like, my life circumstances, my dad was in the Army, we bounced around a lot when I was younger. And then my parents divorced, obviously, so I went back and forth between them. And they were each living in different communities. And it tended to be, like, oddly enough, my mom, who was white, usually lived in black communities, and then my dad was black, lived in white communities. And I had very different experiences in both places, you know, and it was like, I would go back and forth, like, you know, spend the school years with one and summers with the other, and I really, you know, started to have different, you know, notice, like, the way people would see me in those environments. And, you know, I started having experiences, like, out in the world that, you know, kind of taught me about skin color and what, you know, how people perceive that and perceive me. And, but there was also, like, another kind of hidden thing going on. So there was the overt things that had happened throughout my life, but then there was, like, this kind of, like, hidden, quiet, unspoken thing that was also happening, that I really didn't have the words for up until, like, really, like, the last 5 years. So I think, like, that is the background.
Well, what was the unspoken thing?
The unspoken thing. Yeah, the unspoken thing was, you know, so I, like I said, like, being biracial, I was raised in black and white families, and I would spend time with either. But because my parents were divorced, like, we weren't all together. Like, you know, my experience of race is like everyone else's in a lot of ways. It's very segregated. Like, people stick together. And in my white family, you know, I had the experience of, like, my grandfather, you know, kicked my mom out of the family for marrying my dad and having me. And I learned about that later, like, because I would go visit my grandma, like, my mom and her mom still had a relationship, right? So we'd go visit them, but we always had to leave before grandpa came home. And I was like, I didn't really understand. I didn't understand it. Like, I had no idea. I couldn't act, you know, I was just a kid. That's just, like, how things were, right? But I felt it. Like, I really felt it. So I think that ended up, like, instilling a sense of shame, like, at an early age. And I didn't understand, like, I didn't understand it. And, you know, my parents, like, God bless them, they didn't understand it. Like, you know, I was having this experience, but, like, nobody, it was just like the way things were. So it got, like, really ingrained into my psyche at a young age. And, like, from that, like, I was, you know, but beyond, like, the overt stuff, like, I've been carrying a lot of psychic wounds throughout my life that I received from, like, experiences like that, where it was like, it's not something overtly that happens, but it's like, it really, like, and it's really impactful, you know? So, that's the thing, like, that I found words for, you know, really just in the last 5 years, was, like, I discovered, I'd heard about it, you know, but, like, colorblind racism, right? Like, and that realization came through, like, an actual experience, like, that I had in the workplace. Like, you know, I had a manager, like, white manager, older guy, you know, tell me that, like, in conversation, like, oh, he just threw out there that he didn't see color. You know, I was actually showing him my art and kind of talking about, like, basically what I'm saying now. I was like, I'm biracial, like, I grew up, and it was, like, really confusing and difficult. He's like, I don't see race. Like, okay, cool, kind of going on. But the second time he said it to me, I was like, no, like, I really felt it. Like, in that moment, I felt like the erasure that comes with that mentality. Like, he was erasing my blackness, you know. According to my DNA test, I'm 43% white, 57% white. I didn't know that was possible. But my blackness was erased in his eyes in the moment. And that really made me angry, you know. I was just like, you know what? You know, this was like, you know, 3-4 years ago. I'm 52 now. like I'm like a grown man, right? Like you can't do that to me. So I got mad, but I didn't, I kind of called him out on it, and then he flipped out and said all this crazy shit. That's the whole conversation. But I like in that moment, like I like that happened, and I'm like looking it up, and I'm like, has this like I'm feeling all messed up about it. I'm like, does this happen? Like, what is this? I'm looking up, I'm like, oh, this has happened over here. Like well-intentioned whites who believe that telling a black person that they don't see color is some like moral high ground when it's really just it's about erasure. Really, it's what it is. And really like once I like had that experience, I started like thinking back on my entire life. I'm going back to like childhood, like what I just shared with my grandparents. It's like this has been happening my whole fucking life, and it's like I've been having like feeling it all along, and then like feeling like something's defective with me, and no, now that I've gotten older, got to this older, I've been painting for like 25 years. I've been out here doing my thing and trying to figure out what it means to be an artist all along. What does it mean for me to like who am I? What am I really doing? Like that experience, as messed up as it was, like really activated like the fact that like the work that I've been doing or been avoiding or like kind of tiptoeing into or afraid of doing was the work that there was I needed to do this work. There's a reason for my own sanity and for a defense to like punch back and like that mentality, which is I think still very rampant in society.
I remember when that happened to you because you came into the gallery like that night and you told me about it.
Yeah.
You were like I had this experience today and I don't know, like you were processing it,
Yeah.
I think a little bit, but you were pissed. That was for sure. I actually won't ever forget it because you talk about it now as such a kind of key moment.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, but
Yeah.
it seemed like it shifted something with you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you utilize, I mean, symbolism, I guess, within your work to highlight these different things? It's like they're subversive, but they're very overt at the same time.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that, like what we're looking at when we look around here and see panthers and zebras and all this stuff? Because clearly the color, we know where that comes from, right? Within your identity. But I'm really interested in how you integrate these different visual ideas into the paintings and what they represent to you.
Yeah. And the color also comes from like identity, but also like mental health, like depression. Like they say like a hallmark of black and white painting is depression.
I know that.
But as far as symbolism, like I for a long time I've been trying to figure out like how to talk about this stuff in my work, and when I was at CCS back at the turn of the century. It was big. It was, back then it was like, it was before DEI, before Black Lives Matter, before like a lot of stuff, and like I'm like, trying to figure out how to paint, and then also like, being encouraged to like, why do you make art, in fine arts? Like it's about the why, right? So like, as a figurative artist, like I was doing a lot of self-portraits back then. I think, I'll go back to that. Do a lot of self-portraits and like paintings about family. And for me, like family was like very broken, and I have, interracial family, and I hadn't really dealt with this yet, but a dysfunctional family. I'm like, I wanted to talk about that stuff, but like, painting, I was like one of like a few like arts of color and largely like white fine art suited body, right? Which is like it's that's like kind of been the story of my life in a lot of ways as an adult. Like between one and so there wasn't as much of an audience for that kind of work then, you know, there's a lot of like maybe like resistance even I would say to it. Like now, you know, we've gone through like this journey since back then, which is great. It's like people want to see more Black art. They're like they want to support it. You know, like it's suddenly, you know, not suddenly, but like for whatever reasons, you know, there's more of an audience for it. And I think that's a both in me too. Like and with you know with these other things that have happened in my life, like whatnot. Like it's a both in me to speak more about my experience. Because my experience is like being biracial, like, you know, my experience just crosses over into like these two different worlds, right? So I can relate to the Black experience without having like, you know, fully experienced it. I've experienced a lot of it. But I can also like empathize with white people, because of my family, because I interact with them all the time. It's like, you know, whether or not they can interact and empathize with me is another thing. But symbolism, like as a realist artist, you know, I really try for, you know, since I went to CCS, like to figure out how to talk about these difficult, complicated things in a way that is or makes sense to me. You know, I wasn't gonna say like it's approachable, but it's not that. You know, like. As far as like the audience, you know, how the audience goes, like my mentor, John Lockhart, you know, he was a Black artist. He was a master portrait artist, a muralist. He was like amazing illustrator, you know, and his art was about the African diaspora, but he was also a prolific, you know, painter. He would show in galleries. So like he told me once like. He had a gallery that was representing him, and the gallery person, whatever, said to him, like, you know, your figures are so Black, can you make them a little bit lighter? It's like, you know, but like, you know, he and I like talk, and, you know, he kind of like, inspired me to like, in our conversations back then, you know, to think about like, you know, what is my work really about? You know, like I guess what I'm trying to say is like a sense of like painting about something bigger than myself. So, you know, that being said, like symbolism in my work. Like, so I got to like, I started using panthers in my work back in I think it was about 2019. And that was like, that started because I went to a panel talk at the Charles Wright Museum. And the talk was, there were former members of the Detroit Black Panther Party there, you know, talking about their experiences in the party and their perspectives on race today. And I was like, amazing. And, you know, while they're talking, like there's a little white woman on stage, like, you know, and just kind of sitting there. And I was like, ooh, I wonder what she's doing up there. And so when she started speaking, and she's telling the story of how the White Panther Party came to be. And she was Lady Sinclair, John Sinclair's partner. And I was like, how have I never heard about this? You know, like, I was like really inspired by that, like as a biracial person, like the story of like real allyship in a time when like, you know, we're in a civil rights movement, you know, like the most like contentious time in race relations. So I was like, oh man, like why, you know, like it, you know, I was like really kind of searching for like those kind of heroes, you know, in history or whatever, like, you know, if you were going back and be an abolitionist or like whatever, but like people who like actually were willing to stand up with the Black community and protect us and like that and stuff. So I started using like Panther imagery, like both. Like I wanted to include both. Like some people have heard about White Panthers, some people haven't, but like to me, I was like, oh, these are the ones who were like really fighting and like, and that, you know, at the time I was hanging out like with friends who were like gun owners, and I was like going shooting, and I was like, you know, kind of facing that my own fear of guns, like to see what that's about. But you know, during like the time of like the police, there was like, you know, one after another, like police shootings of black people, and I was like, you know, the horror of that and the feeling of like helplessness that one feels from watching that. It's just like, you know, I was like, oh man, should I get, you know, shot or die? Like, oh, if I would protect myself, I don't want to be killed, you know, that way. And so I was like, I did it, the Black Panthers, you know, and I learned, you know, the whole history of like black gun ownership, you know, and like think about the debate in the civil rights movement, you know, nonviolent protests versus like violent protests, you know, like it's kind of, you know, there's advantages, disadvantages of both, but like if you have a gun, people are less likely to like break into your house and like, you know, if you're shooting out of it, but hey, that's a whole other conversation. So Panthers, Panthers are what led me to the zebra imagery. So I was like thinking about, I was like working with Panther imagery, I was like learning more about individual Panther like leaders and like events and all that stuff. But I was still feeling like where do I fit in this story, in this in the mix, right? So I, you know, like throughout my life I felt, you know, a part of one but never fully, a part of the other but never fully, you know, and I was like, there's like a middle ground where I exist that even if like people aren't gonna acknowledge it, like I need to like claim it, you know, I need to like bring it into existence. So I started like, you know, I kind of, you know, I was in therapy at the time, I was in deep diving, you know, like my childhood and stuff, working through my family dysfunction, and I was just remembering like, you know, like I said, I grew up across racial lines, but I remember being a kid and like living in.
I'm gonna fix this.
Oh, okay.
It's crackling. Is it anywhere you guys can turn it? Sorry.
But I remember there was a moment when like I was in Boston, there were some, I was on Boston, there was like mostly black kids, and like one of them saw that like my mom was white, and they were like, oh, you're a zebra, and I was like, okay, I didn't know what that meant, but like, that like really, you know, I just remembered that, and like, I thought that it was like such a beautiful metaphor for the like biracial like experience, and like race in general. It's like for me, like I'm like, I'm black and white at the same time, and then society is still very segregated. It's like still very segregated. So that's when I came up with the Zebra Panthers. You know, like the idea of this like, you know, interracial, biracial, anti-racist, like powerful symbol, and I started using the Zebra Panthers, and then that led to the birth of Zebra Maine, which is like this, you know, human panther hybrid that is has zebra stripes, and yeah, so like I really fall in love with that, like embrace that as a beautiful like metaphor for my interracial experience and like the state of race relations up to today.
Can you talk about the gnomes?
Yes. So the gnomes. You know, it's funny, like the gnomes, like, you know, they started with. So I had a show back in 2018. Some of you have seen it. It was Troublemaker, my solo show in 2018 at Hatch Art in Hamtramck. And that was like that was a big show for me, you know. Like that was my first show where I was really like, you know, I was like, you know, all bets are off. You know, I'm gonna stop like ignoring this, stop. It was the first time I started talking about race and politics in my work. So, and in that show, I had a gnome, like very much like this one here. I mean. And the white one on the top of this totem pole. And it's funny, it was like the gnome idea, like I was thinking of the gnome, like that summer I had my mom had retired, you know, and I got her like a big stone garden gnome for her garden. Like she loves gardening and stuff. and she's always been into gnomes. Like when I was a kid, she bought me this book on how to draw gnomes. So I draw like gnomes. So like, but now being older, like in that world, she lives in rural Southwest Michigan, where I spent a lot of time in my teens and early adulthood, and places it was like that's like colorblind racism central, but like and places where there's like a very little diversity, like racist ideas kind of fester. It doesn't matter what race, but like in those places, like I was living in Paw, Michigan during like the Rodney King beating, and then the next year, LA riots were happening when I was graduating from high school, and I'm like living in like like man, I really felt it was really did not feel safe. Anyway, so like the gnomes are like it's like my connection with my mom in a good way. Sorry. But like it's like me, this idea of like there's this like kind of fantasy figure that lives like in the woods, and they're the gnomes like in folklore, they're about like guarding their treasures or whatever. And I started thinking of like the gnomes as like how with colorblind racism, like to them like racism is just like it's a mythology or like something from the past. It's just like an abstraction that it's like it's not real, So I was like, I made this connection with the gnomes and my mom, and like I put hoods on them. And it's like because obviously I wanted it to be pretty clear that it's about race, but at the same time, but making that connection, I guess, between I think you get it, like this idea that race is like not real to certain people, but also with like the gnomes, like sometimes these symbols, like I'll start using them, like I'm like I don't know if I should do that, like or I guess like I won't fully understand it, what it is, but the more I learn about it, it's I'm like, oh yeah, it's like gnomes they're about guarding their treasures, and then like as a metaphor for like those in society who are guarding like America's riches and wealth and like resources from certain types of people, and I don't know, I think it works. So panthers, zebras, gnomes.
What about this guy?
I do it here. So like I went to art school. There, everybody gets drawn to certain artists, right? Like I really fell in love with Philip Guston's work back then, and I come back to it again and again. And I had done this piece. I think was it in my last show at the different show?
Yeah. Django.
Yes, Django, where it was like I love Philip Guston's work, and I think also I like looking at him too because like he's a celebrated artist who is a white artist who was like willing to make art about racism in the Klan and like very explicitly like bring to light like these nefarious like meetings and groups of people who were doing their thing, whatever. So I look at his work and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have like a black Philip Guston figure? So I did that piece from a few years ago, and I played around. I love the Cyclops figure as well, and I've done like white Cyclops figures as well to represent a certain thing, but like a black Philip Guston. But this one is like a full figure, and it's really to me it's about like kind of what I was experiencing during like EEI and like this experience with this manager and talking about racism and all this stuff, and like realizing like that nowhere really feels safe, like, and just like making a space to feel like fully free and just be in America. Like I wanted to like create a space for that, for certain type of person. I don't know. I mean, in some ways, this was like, it represents like a close friend of mine who passed away last year. He was very like outspoken about race, but like a lot of us, like he had, we self-medicate to like feel that sense of like comfort or safety, and freedom. It's like you don't feel it in the world, but we can like induce ourselves to feel, you know what I mean? So, that feeling, like I remember during that exchange, like this idea of like, during DEI, the whole point was like for white people to have the uncomfortable conversations, and I'm just like, I got sucked into that bullshit, and I feel like, as far as like race, my work, it isn't necessarily about like racism itself, but it's just like, it's about like living with the awareness of racism, that it's in society, right? And so like, when we talk about racism, I'm like, I'm uncomfortable all the time. They're like, so you guys want to get uncomfortable? But like, I don't know, talking to that guy, and I was like, it's, black people are uncomfortable all the time. It's like, what are we talking about? So like I wanted, like this painting is like, I want to make a painting for a place where you're kind of free to just be human, like whatever. But also like, my man was like, would tell you to, fuck off in a heartbeat. So, I've said enough.
So when you moved to Detroit, how did that shift your perspective? Like after growing up in a rural environment and kind of relocating, throughout your childhood, what was it, when did you move to Detroit? What was that like? Like how did that impact you?
Yeah, it was huge. Coming to Detroit, I came here in '98, and like I didn't necessarily grow up in Southwest Michigan. Like I said, I bounced around a lot as a kid. My dad was in the Army, but I've been in Michigan since I was 13. And since then, 13, kind of came of age in Southwest Michigan. I lived in I went to like 3 different high schools. I graduated from Paul High School, and like I said, during like the Rodney King times, and I kind of like migrated around after high school, and I went away to Ann Arbor, and I spent several years there, and it was there that I've always like drawn since I was a kid, and I always like thought I'm an artist, like I had no idea what I was doing. I had never shown in a gallery. I never even been to a museum until I started taking these classes with John Lockhart at Washington Community College. So, he really he saw something in me that I needed that kind of validation from somebody, and he was like a real artist, so, I really absorbed everything he had to teach in a year and a half. And he encouraged me to apply to art school, He was like, why don't you check out CCS? It's right next door. So I did, and thankfully got accepted, and moved up here in '98 for the fine arts program. With a focus on painting, and I've always been a figurative artist, I guess, but I was doing crazy, believe it or not, brightly colored, funky, figures, I had a friend, I would be the dude, I was also painfully shy back then, so, I wouldn't talk to anybody. I had a friend who would be man, you're the guy who would be, hanging out at parties all night long, not say a word, and you just go home and, draw everything that happened, so, and that's great, but, so Mr. Locker, he was the first, real professional artist that I met, and he inspired me to really take my art seriously and really take it seriously, be a serious artist. And to me, that's I moved to Detroit, '98, art school, it's like dream come true for me. But also like Detroit, I had been to Detroit before that, and I was like, man, Detroit is like scary. It was like back then it was still like just looked like a bombed out city, you know. And it was very dark, and I didn't know anything about the city, you know. So I moved here and I went to school, and I ended up staying here. It wasn't the plan, but I did for different reasons. And over time, I was like, you know, I was like going back and forth a lot between, you know, Detroit proper and like the suburbs, for different reasons, you know, and I was starting to get the sense of like, okay, wow, like the history of Detroit is, it's like, you can't avoid race. When looking at the history of Detroit, it's like it defines like everything today. So like I was living here and I was like, and I started to realize like, you know, I actually feel safer in Detroit like, than anywhere else I've ever lived. So like, everybody else is like, oh man, Detroit's got this stigma about it, but I'm like, you know, when I'm in the suburbs, like I've been like, you know, I lived in Beverly Hills and I got pulled over on my street twice for driving while black, you know, and like one night a fucking cop came to my house because he saw me the night before at a gas station, and I fit the description of somebody who was a robbery suspect, you know. I'm like, you know, I gotta get the fuck out of here. So, but Detroit, I was like, you know, Detroit, I love Detroit. I want to, you know, so I started to feel like, you know, a special attachment to it, and just, you know, for all the reasons. But like, over time, like, I spent more time learning about Detroit's history, and just like, just been really fascinated by it. I think like, it's the first time in my life where I've lived in like when I was younger, I lived in like different like black communities, you know. But in Detroit, like it's, I never lived in a place like that, and it really where like, you know, being black is like celebrated, and it's okay, you know, it's like it's okay to be black in Detroit.
Did you feel safer overall?
Yeah, 100%. So, and you know, it just made me, you know, thinking back to like living in Paw Paw and all that stuff. It's like, you know, I spent on in a very like basic way, like safety numbers, right? Like it's just like, but I never felt that before, and I think like it allowed me to really look at like how the experiences of like growing up, you know, with, you know, not all my family was racist, but like with that kind of foundational like experience of with my grandfather, and then different experiences throughout my life, like it helped me to really embrace like, you know, my being black, you know, my black side and everything, and it's like in a way it's like it's difficult to do that, and when you're like in this little, you're like kind of isolated in these like rural zones or whatever. So yeah, Detroit's been, it was like the, you know, best decision I ever made was like moving up here.
Can you talk a little bit then about how this idea of being viewed comes up a lot in your paintings? Like there's a real sort of like theatrical component to it, but it's like performative in a way, and it feels like as the viewer, you're almost like, should I be seeing this? Am I? You find a way to make the viewer a little bit like uncomfortable, but while conveying your own discomfort. Can you talk about how you utilize these kind of circus themes and theatrical themes to do that?
Yes, I did try. I mean, it felt like the circus theme, like this painting here with the two acrobats. Like I ended up working on that one for 2 years.
And it came in wet.
Yeah.
For the records. So every bit of 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I had it in a show like a year and a half ago, and then when I got back, I was like, I know it's not done. So I was like, it really took a long time to really get like the composition, like the arrangement right, like making pretty pictures is not important to me, but like making a good painting is very important. But like the service theme, like I remember, I don't know why, but like I kind of latched onto this memory of being a kid and my father taking my brother and I to a Ringling Brothers circus performance. And I mean, I was a kid, like I don't remember like much of it, but something about like that, going to this place to like experience something like sensational, like other, not otherworldly, but like it's where you go to be like delighted and I don't know what more to say about it, but I kept thinking of that, and in relation to like the age of DEI that we went through, and like my own like very like intimate experiences with it, and seeing a lot of performative like acts during that time, performative allyship or whatever. By like well-intentioned people and then not so, like whatever the case. But like I kept thinking of that as like a great metaphor for what I was seeing and experiencing during that time. So like I've been working that painting and several other paintings, like some of these paintings have been like in progress for
That one's been in progress forever.
Yes.
This one was, I remember seeing
Yeah.
it in the studio.
Yeah, like I stressed that canvas right when I moved into my newer studio over at 333 Midland. So I got more space, I'm like, I'm gonna go bigger. And I was like, a little bit bigger than what I've done. And then I created a Quincy, I'm like, I gotta go bigger. So like, but, yeah, so like, I mean, I guess as far as like the service theme, like I think like, and you and I talked, like when we met, and I showed you the work, and we was talking about the show, and I kind of had a plan, I showed it to you, and I was like, I wanted it to feel like kind of a journey through life, through a life, through a human life or whatever, a life in a world that doesn't see race. A society doesn't see race, but a person whose experience is very much been affected by race. So I wanted to feel like a journey, like from you're entering society from the spirit world, coming into this country, into the society. It's the birth canal of the nation. It's about that. Thinking about like the fight against birthright citizenship we're seeing. There's another story about that piece. But anyway, like that, coming to society, birth, rural America, like where that are on the edges of like racial progress or whatever, however you want to call it, like rural America, being black in the country. The cars, that's another story. But like, and then coming to like where your experiences, your experience suddenly put on center stage or whatever. And in my case, I became like which I become often like I'm like the poster child for diversity, right? When you're the only one, or to like and not that again, like my favorite song, my best friend, like my mother. But like when you just become that, like and so anyway, like that's like the arc of my life, I guess, leading up until recent events. And I think like for me, that's been like the connection that I've been able to make with being an artist. Like in my whole life, I'm an artist. Like kind of since I was a kid, I just loved to draw. And like as I got older, like I'm an artist. I want to be an artist. Like I didn't know how to be. I didn't really know what that meant. Mr. Locker really kind of blew the doors open and gave me he was the first person that really believed in me, and like he gave me, I was able to believe in myself after that. I was like, you know what, yeah, you know what, I can really fucking beat somebody.
So, okay, so can you talk then a little bit about how, like, when you are thinking about a solo show, or when you're kind of putting together your ideas for what you want to communicate in a body of work, what are you thinking about? Like, how are you formulating that? And what does your process look like? Because you've got sketches all over your studio, you've got things like all over. Like, what does it look like for you when we're like, okay, Taurus, we have a date on the calendar. What's like your next thing?
My next thing is to remind myself that, you know, I've done this before.
And it's all gonna be okay, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, I think, you know, with this show, whatever, you know, yeah, I got the varsity last year, so like, it's just like, you know, maybe you don't get a little extra pressure. But I mean, yeah, but also like, you know, getting that and you know, making my film like really, you know, I really feel like with all the rejections that I got over the years, it was really like, you know, challenging me to like, you know, obviously like do better or whatever, but really like, is this what am I doing? Like, what am I really doing? What do I really want to say? What do I really want to talk about? You know, because, you know, what are we doing here? You know, and I just like, you know, and like in 2018 with the Troublemaker show, you know, for years I was just like, I was kind of touching on either shoe a little bit here and there, like getting different reactions to that, but I also had not like really worked through a lot of like, you know, these wounds I had been carrying since I was a kid. So like I had to do a lot of inner work. But as far as like getting ready for the show, it's like, and it's taken me a long time too to like be like a cohesive like artist, you know, like where everything kind of like is connected because I think like, you know, when I was younger I might have been, you know, trying to make a living from my art, you know, like, so like, it's just great when people are buying your work, you know, certain type of things I was doing were affordable and like selling very well, but to me, like I really want to be like genuine, like a genuine person, and genuine about my experience, and but in a way that's also like, you know, understanding of like the complexities and like how difficult it is, like for everyone. So with this show, I don't know, it's like, you know, I want the work to be good. I want the paintings to be good, to be solid, like to work. You know, I want them to be engaging. And I, you know, and yeah, like I think, like with some of the work, like I want people to feel something. I want them to feel uncomfortable. You know, like I want people to feel a little bit uncomfortable in that show. You know, like to feel that discomfort that comes with like living in a society that's in where there's a lot of inequality racially, like, whether people see it or not.
Is that what you want people to take away from the show, or what are you hoping that they're gonna feel?
I mean, yeah, that I want to feel very comfortable.
So honest. It's so honest though. Yeah.
Want them to question reality and question race, like their, you know, question. I think like it's very easy. One thing I realized, like, you know, being anti-racist is optional for everybody, really. I mean, like, and you know, for a lot of people, it can be easy to go through life and not experience it, or, you know, I can understand like how for a lot of people it can be a thing that's like, well, why should I care about that? It's like not affecting me, you know. But I don't know. as like, as a society, and we're seeing that play out, like, politically, like, I don't see myself as a political artist, or necessarily even an artist that might aren't necessarily about, overt racism. It's just like, we're seeing it, like, the Constitution is constantly being, debated about, because it's saying like, oh, I'm gonna be equal. It's like, really are, does it really inspire inequality? Because if you really look at it, like, facts and dissect it, it's not. But like, can we just, and people just want to like kind of disregard that or whatever. Like society, we Americans, we're it's like an idea, an ideal. Like there's the idea of it is being, it's swinging back and forth, whatever. But I think like for me, it's taken me a long time to get to this place where I realized like, I met other people who grew up in like dysfunctional homes, and suddenly I was like I went through life like feeling very like invisible and isolated and like confused and unsure and everything. And then as far as like I blame society for that. I blame my family. I worked through the family stuff through like I found help for that. But like the society part, like that's the bigger thing. And like, oh yeah, last thing I'll say about it, it's like during DEI, in the workplace or whatever, like I was there and like we're being encouraged to like talk about like what I'm talking about now, basically. But it was a strange situation like in the workplace where there's like a very diverse cross section, people. It's not necessarily a safe place to do that or whatever. So I think for me, like, but I think it's like very valuable to do that, to like, because I think there's other people out there who experience the same, and there's power in that connection. And for people who don't connect with it in that way, like I think like, like I'm not here to teach you about racism, like I'm just like sharing my experience with, my journey on both sides of the tracks and like the ways that I've stumbled through life, trying to walk on this unequal path. I think I want people to kind of get that from it. I don't know.
Well, I think that like what I notice when people come through the show is like you're not providing people with any answers. Like that's not what you're doing, right? You're just kind of presenting your experience in various ways,
Yeah.
And so I think that there is sometimes that discomfort for people because they're like, how should I be feeling at this point? Like, is it supposed to be uncomfortable? And the answer is yeah, actually. And one of the things that I tell people when they come in blindly, right? Like they're coming in from next door or something like off the street. And it's like, they think they get it, but they're not sure that they get it. And they'll kind of look at me like, so what's the no? That's the first thing usually. What is this no? And why does he have a gun? And what I usually tell people is like, it's what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like, he's not hiding it. You know what I mean? Like, and you're not hiding it. You're presenting it, but you're not solving it for people either, which is one of the things that I love most about your work. I mean, you and I have been working together for years. Like, we've known each other for years. I've been to every solo show that you've done, I think, really. And what I see with this body of work is how it's just evolved and taken some of the things that you've been talking about for a long time. But this work is a little bit more nuanced in how it's presented, because with Troublemaker, even with the last show, everything felt a little bit more overt, right? Like there were Confederate flags, there were newspaper articles shown, right? Like there was a really direct commentary, and this is sort of has a more experiential feel to it, where I'm invited in, especially because of the scale. I mean, these are huge, and for you, this is really large. You tend to work, kind of in that mid-sized to smaller, with the exception of shows, but in your scale is gradually then increasing. So how has that played into your evolution as an artist? Like, I mean, is this the max? Are we gonna see more? Like, how is the scale going to, I don't know, evolve, I guess?
It's, I like that you mentioned that because back even before Troublemaker, for years I was doing those like these small, like postcard size paintings.
Yeah, they were like little, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I was trying to, pay the bills with my art. But I mean, it also helped me like connect with the city, like getting out and like exploring and meeting people and have shows and meet people who live here. Like, oh, I know that place, and they share their story about their connection to Detroit. But yeah, like over the years, like things really changed when I got my studio at 333 in Huntingburg. It was the first time in 70 years that I had a studio outside of home. So, getting that space, I was able to work with oils again regularly and, start to stretch my own canvases again. So, like, really, having the space to, like, work bigger has been a big part of it. But also, like, working bigger, wanting to make a bigger statement, really, like, it's exciting. I love like the challenge of it, but also like I want to make big. I want to make an impression. I want to make big stuff. So yeah, there's gonna be more big stuff, but I'm also like with this show, like diving into these new technologies like 3D printing. I've had the opportunity to like start exploring like digital sculpture. Like my first love is painting, obviously, but I've also done sculpture. I fell in love with sculpture too at CCS and have dabbled in it over the years. But I've learned through technology, so I'm playing around 3D printing, like the idea of like making series and whatnot, and figuring out ways that I can incorporate that into my paintings and my painting shows, because I want to. I've been thinking, I think, for the last few years, like, I wanted my shows to have more like installation type pieces, like, where the entire space is activated, where it's not just like you're looking at things on the wall,
That could be really interesting, especially given your, how the fact that you deal with the idea of being watched, in performance and these things. I think that the more, delving into a digital direction could be cool for you. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions
I
for
can't
Taurus?
wait.
Oh,
I can't
You're
wait.
just sitting
I have.
there, so patient.
I have so many.
So patient. All right, let's ask
Yeah,
one
I've just been.
or two.
This is it's like a comment and then a question, but the comment is kind of like a tribute. Like I've known you like 26 years, and first of all, congratulations on the show. I remember seeing these pieces before the show, and in your studio, and I remember walking and going like, these are paintings, because first and foremost, we see the subject matter, and we see you, but then we see that these are like paintings, and they're masterful paintings. I mean, I can tell that you love painting. But like the tribute thing kind of is like, you've been working on this theme as long as I've known you. I remember at CCS, you're working with your paintings are like ghosts in my mind. I have for like 26 years of your paintings in my head. And I remember the ones that you were doing in the studio. And it's like, I think it was a white family with a black baby, but then on the wall there's like portraits of, and I'm like, I don't know this guy. So I'm like, what is this about? And that you have come through all of this, and what I hear Melanie saying is kind of what I'm thinking too, is like, with the birth of Zebra Main, it's like, you're fully becoming what you are. Like, there's a lot of acceptance in that. You talk about some like shame. And so I see these paintings, first of all, just like as a triumphant struggle, like you have not let go of this, this is a part of you, you work through it, and so I see these paintings as a total like psychological and spiritual healing. You know, like that's how I see them. You know, and I wonder too about the question that kind of comes up is, you know, like the circus theme or whatever that, you know, because I feel like there's like some transfiguration that occurred in your life. You, back in the day, like you would not talk. When you said painfully shy, like you would not speak, you know. And then when we connected a bunch of years ago, the first thing I noticed was like, he knows who he is now. Like your vocal volume. Just when I was just like, oh, this guy, he knows where he is. He knows what he's doing. And so I feel like you've created this world that is your world. Like that's how I see these things. It's like some sort of like mythological world that you kind of, or archetypal world that you created to like show your birth into this space. So that's kind of my question. It's like, is this like a world that you create? Like they remind me a bit of like Francis Bacon almost, like with this, like this is on display, you know, like, and I'm separating it from reality. It's its own thing. They're very direct, you know. So my question is like, is that kind of creation of a personal mythology, like, was that like, is that a part of it? Is that, and if it is that like a freedom that you have?
No, thank you, Matt, for all of that. I think one thing I realized, like, that, yeah, I've been, like, my sense of reality was, like, very distorted, like, from childhood by, like, these experiences I was having. And it took me a long time to, like, accept myself, you know, like, yeah, I, like, you know, talk about, like, society's problems and my family's problems, like, you know, it's easy to talk about everybody else's problems or whatever, but, like, I had a lot of problems caused by this situation, but, like, you know, I did, like, the work or whatever. So, I think, like, you know, as we were saying, like, it is a lot of self-acceptance has happened over the years, and just like willingness to like be vulnerable. That, like, you know, that was something that I could never allow that when I was younger, you know, like at CCS, like, cause like my inner like structure was just not very strong. So like, it was very hard for me to be like open or whatever. But I would, you know, I would try, like the painting that you talked about, like, yeah, I love that painting. It was like basically me, like making, it was a portrait of my grandparents, my white grandparents, like holding up like grandchild, which never happened, you know what I mean? But like, I was like creating a wonderful memory that I did get to experience. So in a way, like, it was like my way of changing the world, changing my past or like healing like these wounds or whatever. But also like as an artist, like realizing like this is like you know, this is just me, you know, this is like I'm experiencing like, this thing is pretty common in society. So but I think like, yeah, the theme of like distorted realities is something I've been thinking about a lot, which I think in that like frame, like it makes it's in that world, it's like part of why I turn to symbolism on. Because you know, like I'm a realist painter, like figurative painter, whatever, but like, you know, I'm creating these things that you know, point to these experiences or ideas or whatever. So like I use symbolism and I distort things, and it gives, once I like realize like I can do that or whatever, it's giving me the freedom to like play in that world as a figurative artist.
I mean, it's really impressive because, I mean, what I feel like, I can only speak for me, but like what I want as an artist is, you know, to develop my own language, you know, which can never be, you know, forced, you know, not if it's gonna become real and in an authentic way, and, you know, like, your vocabulary is your own, and it's like hard fought, it's yours, you know, and it's your world that you created, you know, and there's somehow always you know, every single thing.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's something like, yeah, I think, like, you know, every artist wants that, you know, to whatever that is, I don't know, you know. Yeah, this is the result of like years of, questions and, you know, experimenting and trying different things and, you know, challenging myself, being challenged by, you know, experiences or whatever. But still, like, you know, going back to the solar, you know, the canvas and that inner drive of like being to make it, you know, make sense of it, but also like communicate it, you know, through the work, through this medium.
Yes.
Do you work on one painting until it's done, or do you work on multiple paintings at a time?
Yeah, I tend to bounce around. Yeah, like I'll have like several pieces up, and it works for me because I paint with oils, you know. So like I can spend a day on one, you know, then the next day spend, you know, work on another one, and then 3 days later come back to the other one, and like it's just set up enough to like keep layering it. So yeah, I'll work on several pieces at a time, and a lot of the paintings like they like I'll start off with an idea, but they really transform over time. You know, like each of these paintings, like I didn't know that it was gonna look like this when I started it. You know, like I had an idea, but it wasn't like, you know, some artists will kind of draw everything out and it's like, and it's kind of set from the beginning. But me, it's like it's really like I kind of find the paintings along the way as I go, and so I think like bouncing around and like thinking about the work outside of the studio and, you know, like doing sketches of like, you know, this could, well, how about this, or I need to add that, or, you know, yeah, they kind of evolve. And these paintings, like, you know, keep going back to that one, like I said, I worked on it over 2 years, like I've never worked on paintings for this long, you know, and that's why they have like such a beautiful texture, you know, like because I was working and moving things around and trying to get the composition right and all that stuff. And like the more I work, like the more texture I got, I'm like, oh, this is like, I love, you know, I just kind of started falling in love with the texture itself, you know, like forget the image. So yeah.
You had a question in the back?
Yeah, I was noticing that in these works, there's mostly like a lot of shades of gray.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an interesting metaphor in context of this work too. That the idea of black and white is really just a social construct, and that in reality, just philosophically, even there are so many shades of gray.
Yeah.
But my question is about the piece behind you. I'm curious about that figure, and I'm wondering if that is like someone, because a lot of these figures are very like kind of humanoid, animal, hybrid, but that one is like a human figure, and I was wondering, it sort of diverges from the other figures.
Yeah, thank you. On your first point, like, I used to have this thing where I felt like, you know, yeah, like, I'm moving, black and white, like, has significance to me on, you know, the obvious levels, but also I felt like, thinking about my parents and, like, them coming together back then, you know, at a time when it was, like, you know, still there was a lot of, like, resistance to, like, interracial couples, you know. The idea of, like, painting just black and white, and, like, I'm mixing them together, you know, like, I'm being bad, you know, like, breaking the rules, like, you know, like, thinking about what they did, you know, and, like, it kind of helped me think of them in a different light. It was like, you know, they not in a, you know, they divorced, like, so they have them together, but like, just any kind of interracial kind of activity is really, there's always like tension around it. That's been like part of like American system. But painting, yeah, like often with my figures, like usually, like often I'll use myself, like you know, or I'll invent the figure. You know, I do a lot of sketching, like so you know, it's kind of a combination of things, like but with these, like with the Panthers, like I use myself as a model for these paintings. With this one, like once I decided that I wanted to have a woman on writing the zebra corn, like I wanted to like actually work with a model, and you know, at the time I was like, okay, what should I do? Like went through the people I know or whatever, but like I decided to like use a model from Instagram. You know, there's like a few art models that I follow who do like live sessions. So I hired this woman to like post me for a couple hours. I told her the ones I wanted to, you know, I was doing, and did these sketches, and it worked out really great. So like I wanted that. Like I've been a figurative artist and all along. I love you know, I love going to figure drawing sessions. I love drawing people, you know, but even so, like I've always kind of struggled with like how to use that in my paintings. You know, it almost feels like separate. But with this, like maybe this might be the first painting where I'm like, all right, I want a model on here, like rather than trying to make it up, you know, which I do, but it's like I wanted the reality of like a real person, and it was just very convenient, you know, rather than going like, you know, hiring somebody to come in and model for me, which was like I would love to do that too, but I don't know. It was like very convenient for me to do that, like have somebody like set up the camera, he poses for me. I got what I needed, so I got the drawing that I want. So I've had that on my wall in my studio while I was working on this painting. Like I kept referencing that drawing that I did, and yeah. So that's the story with her, and even like with her the doubling of her arms, like that's when I was drawing her, like, you know, artist model move. So I was drawing and I kind of, you know, as I'm working and like whatever, like that's the way I drew her. But I think like my experience of working on my film for the Kresge and like doing animation, which was the first time I'd ever done that, but like the idea of like, you know, onion skin drawing, like every drawing is like a slight movement from one to the next, right? So I think that like had that in mind for when I was doing this painting. I'm like, I'm gonna include that. Like I felt like, you know, it's like you get a sense of like she's catching her balance or whatever. Like the idea of like having movement in a painting. You know, it's always like a very like still shot. You know, like with the acrobat, it's like a moment in time that's like frozen. But you know, trying to give a sense of time in the painting a little bit in that way.
But who is it?
Who is it? She's a young Latina model on Instagram. But who is in the painting? Who is she?
Savali and everything is Savali.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think about this painting a lot, and as part of like the experience I had in the corporate world through DEI, like, you know, this colorblind manager I had, and then, you know, I like later ended up being kind of roped into giving a presentation on colorblind racism to a whole slew of managers. Which was very like wrong. But I did amazing because like but I feel like this is like this painting is about being made, being a token for diversity, and in a sense, like this woman is that woman who kind of pushed me into being that the I don't know. You get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's like she's riding this magical creature. She is in charge.
Yeah, like the focus is supposed to be on her or whatever, and yeah, what you're saying, yeah, as well, like, she's presenting this thing, but like,
It's not.
she's in control, yeah.
Like she's the conductor or something.
Yeah, which, and circuses, like with the lion tamer, it's about man controlling these beasts, like these, uncontrollable forces or whatever. Like our power, like ways that we feel superior.
All right, we're gonna do,
Go ahead, Mitchell.
okay.
One comment, well, two comments. One is that, and I know you call yourself a realist painter, but I see more as a surrealist, using realistic forms. But I remember your talk from a few years ago, and the mood in the room, and it was like, okay, there are a group of people who understand issues around race, and then there's everybody up there.
Yeah,
And I think you're in a very different place now.
yeah.
I mean, you sound like you've come to terms with a lot of that stuff. And this idea of, I don't see color, but I always sort of turn, the last time I heard somebody say that, I turned it around to them and I said, I see what's there, it's what I do with it.
Melissa?
I've never heard the term colorblind racism before. Does that just strictly mean like somebody literally saying, I don't see color? Is that the definition of that term, or is there something more to it?
There's more to it. I mean, I think it's worth, like, look it up and look at it. It's something that came from, like, it was kind of co-opted from Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, where he was saying, like, this dream of, like, little black boys, little black girls, whatever, playing together without constant characters, color of skin, blah, blah, blah. And, like, progressive whites, maybe liberal whites at the time, took that as like, okay, Dr. King saw not see color. Like, so even like, well-intentioned folks back then, took that mentality or whatever. But the thing about it is like, you're choosing to be blind to like the experience of like inequality in America, racially, basically. So it's kind of like, it's in a sense, the way it comes across is like people saying like, that's a color. It's like, but that it's like, it's like a denial of like racial reality, basically.
But I mean, I guess, it's not my world that I haven't experienced, but I guess if you understood that what the person actually was trying to say was in line with the Martin Luther King speech of, it doesn't matter what color you are. I guess I don't want to.
No,
I don't want to take away from your experience, but I'm like, if you knew the intention,
I didn't.
it was just like annoyance at the ignorance of people for saying it
Yeah.
wrong. I guess.
So I get what you're saying. Like in context, if somebody were to say that, I mean, that might be like, that's actually like, hurtful. It's doing that is like erasing the experience of black people of color in this country, and the inequality that they've experienced.
I could
So
see.
in a sense, like,
I
if
can
it was
understand why you would take it
in a
that way.
situation, it might be like, a simple correction. But in this situation, like it's the workplace, my white manager,
Yeah.
me, who's exemplary, like, it was really in that moment, his, like a denial of like my experience, so, you know, because he brought the conversation about race.
Yeah, I mean, that's educational to me, because
Yeah.
I never, like, just as a white person,
Yeah.
wouldn't have occurred to
And
me
like
that
by
somebody
design.
saying that is the same as saying,
100%.
you know, you don't exist, or you.
Yeah. No, and I'm like, you know, and in my experience in this situation, like, yeah, you might say like, in that moment, when he told me that, that's like, it was just me and him in a room by ourselves, and, he brings this conversation to me, and, in that moment, like, I felt that sense of erasure, like, I don't know how else to describe it. And, you know, so I threw it back at him, you know, I felt like you're saying,
So
like,
you did tell him?
being white, like, I don't know about that. I mean, like, it's like your white privilege to be blind to racism, basically.
Uh-huh.
That's like what him. And he couldn't handle it. I mean,
Well, how did
I
he?
don't know. He really fell apart.
Oh, he got upset when you told him that?
Oh, yeah. He said all kinds of crazy stuff. I think like, I mean, I understand your question, you know, and at the time, this was an experience, I wasn't expecting that, you know, I'm just like, I'm there to do my job, you know,
Yeah.
and get my money and get the fuck out, you know.
Yeah.
And he brought this conversation to me after, like, the company, has spent like 2 years, like, doing like,
Educational
inclusion
stuff.
training and like sensitivity, like, oh, that's whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And after all that, like, this guy's gonna say that to me, like, we're basically like, okay, I took it personally, and
Well, that wasn't as bad.
fuck, you know, yeah, I
It
mean,
wasn't as bad.
this, you know, there's so much to be said about it, but let me just say, like, you as a white person, like, yeah, your experiences are mine, and trust me, like me, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but I go through life, like, I understand that racism it's in the environment, and like, I understand, like, every white person I come in contact with, like, you know, their level of, like, awareness about it, or like acceptance of it, or like whatever, like, I'm always like thinking about that, you know, I don't know, you know, what you think about it, and we don't have to talk about it, if we don't, cool, you know, like, but I think, like, if somebody, the problem with him is, like, what I realized after that, and what I've come to realize is, like, I have a low tolerance for that kind of shit now. Like, when I was a kid, you know, I was hidden away because, like, old Grandpa Percival didn't want anything to do with black people. I've been, like, made to leave homes, you know, I went home with white friends, and, like, I've been made to leave because they didn't want, you know, them bringing their black friends home. Like, I've experienced, like, the overt stuff, you know, and that's just, like, personal stuff and whatever, but I'm, like, as an adult, I've grown, like, I've learned about society, history, like, I'm aware, like, we are all living within this timeline that was, you know, that stuff was baked in. People, like, want to place it in history, but, like, it's whatever. That's my, you know, my disagree. But, so if somebody's gonna come to me, like, especially, like, this was, like, a very unique situation, right? On the job, he's my manager.
Yeah.
He's gonna say something that, to me, to my face, no, and, like, I'm not that kid anymore, like, I'm not that kid, you know, like, I've, like, you know, like you were saying, Matt, like, I've come to, you know, accept and embrace and feel proud of, like, who I am, you know, by, you know, the biracial person who's walked these two paths, you know, and, like, you know, and my family's, like, you know, love them dearly, there's been problems, whatever, but, like, I understand too, like, for them, like, they're victims of, our, you know, system of inequality as well, so, like, I don't know.
Do you feel like you were able to educate him because he was just being ignorant? I mean, he was
Yeah,
being
you know,
maybe wasn't
I was
actually
made to that, I
ignorant.
was made to educate them. I was made to educate all these motherfuckers. Well, I know, right? got, he got fired, right? But a year later, I used to be on LinkedIn, I'm not anymore because like, I don't need it. But he like popped up and he was like, he told me like I should stop making work about race because like, I don't want you to be pigeonholed, you know what I mean? Like just out of nowhere. So like he didn't learn anything. He's just still the same asshole, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
I don't know. One
One
more,
more
okay.
question.
Yeah. Thanks.
I have a question, a stylist question,
Yeah.
because it seems like, I was wondering about the choices that you make in positioning the style of your paintings. Because there's some elements in it that are very, say almost like iconic. There's certain icons that are in there. And then there's some things that are more, it reminds me of Chagall or Matisse, later Matisse. And then there's this thing that is almost like comic bookish. Like the perspective of that figure with the almost like fisheye lens view of the foot and the hand. But then the one behind you is probably one of the most realistic, put that word in quotes, most on the scale towards realism between iconic, comic, and realism. And I was just wondering about, is that a conscious choice, or is that the way that they just come out, or?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, you're right. I think like, it's me, just getting more comfortable with, allowing the painting to, I try to create these spaces or whatever that make the most sense, I guess. So I'm thinking about space, I'm thinking about structure, and I'm thinking about, these, going back to the idea of like creating a distorted reality where like, I don't have to like follow all the rules of reality. So I try to like let the painting kind of, evolve as I go and like, not worry too much about the rules of reality. So, but and I'm still trying to like find like, I want to say I find my voice or whatever. Like it's something that I've been doing for years, but like it's really as each painting idea comes up, I'm like, okay, how can I make this work? How better can I answer it? It's a process of like discovery, like figuring things out as I go, and allow myself to try different things.